you know, we're taking time this season to talk with experts from the field about the challenges you're up against every day. In today's episode, we're going to talk about training. It might not be everyone's favorite subject, and in fact, it might feel like training is pulling you or your team away from meeting the demands of the business and potentially putting your goals in jeopardy. However, over the course of today's episode, we hope you'll start to see things from a different point of view. Training could actually be the thing that ensures your hiring plans for this year stay on course. We're joined today by Brad Humphrey, otherwise known as the Contractor's best friend. He hosts a podcast in conjunction with Caterpillar and has tremendous experience in a wide variety of construction-related topics. We're privileged to talk with him today about how he's been able to incorporate training into his team's day-to-day lives and how you might be able to approach training within your own team. So we are here with Brad Humphrey. We're really excited to have you on the podcast today. You have come to be known as the contractor's best friend throughout the industry, and you host your own podcast in conjunction with For Construction Pros and Caterpillar. And I'm curious, how did you end up becoming the host of that podcast?
Well, that was probably I had nothing to do with it. We actually have the co-publisher with that podcast is AC Business Media, and they do a lot. They used to actually take part in owning some of the construction shows, but they sold all those off and they kept their magazines, that type of thing. And really, the lady there that is the head of all of that, she was very close with the Caterpillar people. They were looking to do something PR wise, and she suggested that I might get involved because of my reputation in the industry. And Caterpillar fell for it, and it's been a great relationship for the last 5 years. It's really been fun.
Yeah, well, I think, there's a lot of people in the industry that are really benefiting from that collaboration. So I myself am glad to see it still going strong. And, you're putting out dozens of episodes per year on a variety of topics. It's clear there's a couple of different things that have kind of become close to your heart over the course of watching the show. And not only do you provide your expertise, but you also have other experts from the field coming in and chatting with you to weigh in on different topics. One of the things that I'm really curious to chat a little bit more with you about is training. It's one of those things that it's a common challenge. It's something that people are trying to figure out different ways to overcome, how they might incorporate more training into their businesses. And I know you've had success doing that in your own personal life, your professional life. So I'm curious, when you started thinking about training in the workforce, what were some of the things that came to mind? What are some of the things that you tried to get people more interactive with what they're doing on a day-to-day basis?
Well, that's a complicated question because you're dealing with human beings, right? And so human beings are kind of complicated. The construction industry has always been an industry of doers. And if you actually look up the definition of construction, it just simply means installing materials. So it's not always been a very theoretical or strategic industry. It's a very tactical industry. You go out, you dig dirt, you replace it, you reclaim asphalt, you put sidewalks in, that type of thing. And if you looked at the numbers as I did about 15 to 20 years ago, you began to see the national statistics showing that we're getting older as a country. And this really impacts construction. And so we see these national numbers that are overwhelmingly scary. So we know how many people are going to retire. I'm at the very tail end of the baby boomers, and at 63. And so there's I think baby boomers maybe they include a year or two older than me or younger than I, but most of us are retiring. But what scares me are the people who are in their late 40s and sometimes even the mid 50s who have made so much money in construction that they've thought about retiring early. And that's really, I call that the X factor. I say all that to say we're not replacing them with people that have the same level of expertise and craftsmanship. And the contractors know that. And I've been sending the message for several years, like 15 to 20 years, that I remember clearly, preaching at sessions and workshops and association meetings around the country and with private customers that I had. But we've got to train this next generation. We got to train. And when we were saying that at the same time, most of your public schools are getting rid of technical training classes, or the old shop classes, they used to call it.
Yep.
We see a resurgence of that a bit. A lot of the high schools have what they call CTEs now, career and technical education. And so in fact, I'm on a couple of advisory boards here in Texas for some big school districts. But the point is that I saw the need there. We're not replacing the people. The young people who are coming into the industry have very few mechanical skills. And I used to, my trick question, it turned out to be a trick question when I was interviewing for my own business years ago. We did concrete and asphalt. I remember asking one young man that came in and applied, I said, do you even know what concrete is? He says, yeah, it's the black stuff, right? And no, it's not. And so, we don't even have that. So a lot of times I'm encouraging people that if you don't start now, we have to use some of the workers that we do have, especially our leaders, like our foremen and our leadmen. The problem we have there is that in this industry, part of it is a culture where a lot of times foremen will get a brand new employee, Elizabeth, that has no education and training in construction, and they almost feel it's an anchor around their crew's productivity.
Yep.
And a lot of these guys are paid an incentive on improvements or quality results. So they actually see it as a negative, but we've got to continue to persevere through that. What I've done is try to develop tools. I have several tools that we've developed over the last 2 years with the company I'm working with right now on just trying to help these foremen, give them every benefit and tool we can give them that will help them see the benefit to training, including not penalizing them for their hours worked as a new employee. And this is really hard, but the bottom line is that if we don't take on some of this internal training as contractors, I just don't know if we're going to find enough trained people around to come and work for us, because we are definitely diminishing the numbers in that area.
Yeah, definitely. It's one of those things where it's almost that transfer of knowledge that needs to happen right now, where you have the people that have the skill sets that are not going to be in the workforce in the next 15 years, 20 years, potentially. And how do we make sure that people coming into the industry are able to extract some of the valuable information that's been built over the last few decades.
That's right.
And you're right. Having those programs, not as readily accessible in schools, is tough. And I think there's also sometimes a stigma around it where, if you weren't on a college track, this is what you do. And, there's some negative connotations that I think still persist around that. But I think people are starting to recognize that that's not the case. You can have a very successful career in construction. There's a lot of opportunity for advancement and, really rewarding careers, but it has to start somewhere. Like, you have to get in the door. You have to understand what you're doing. When you say that you've kind of developed and worked in the last few years on building some training in and changed the way you're incentivizing, foremen to be able to incorporate that in, what are some of the most successful tactics that you've seen work that you think actually might be able to be adopted, in other companies throughout the industry?
Well, I think that's a great question too. I wrote a book that's actually on Amazon, and it's called the 7 Steps to Employee Retention. And then one of the chapters in it's a very short book, and it was actually a composite of 7 articles that I'd written for another organization, this AZ Business Media. And they thought that the series was so good that we turned it into a small little handbook for people, and they can download it from Amazon. But one of the chapters is called the 90-day plan, and I really think it's imperative. We use the 90-day plan. The old unions years ago had a 90-day probationary time. Most contractors are aware of that. And while most contractors are not necessarily unionized, we still sort of use that and I think it's a good number of days to give a new employee an opportunity to really check out to see if they like who they're working for. And it gives the employer a chance to really, inspect and monitor the new employee. Do they have the potential to move on? Because obviously you're not going to know everything in 90 days. But in that 90-day plan, the reason I share that with you, Elizabeth, I began years ago, and we've tuned it up really nice now. But I actually lay out for a laborer 12 weeks in a row of the types of things that you could present on a weekly basis. In that is tied to follow-up. There's a pop quiz at the end of each week. When I say pop quiz, don't think of that as a test. It's 5 really easy questions. In the first week, one of the questions might be, where is the Johnny on the spot at the job site kind of a thing, So the point is that what you're trying to do is engage it. But I turn that into a small little booklet for the company I'm working with. We personalize that, and we actually give that now to a new worker. And it's not kept by the foreman. It's actually the accountability is on the employee, because one of the things that we have found, if you look at a lot of your statistics of why people have left, they leave because they're not being talked to. They're not included they don't feel like they're included on the team, and they're not learning, and no one's training them. And so one of the things that I try to do is learn from that to say, okay, well, first of all, we need to increase our communication with new employees. Second of all, we need to start training them like almost on day one if we can. And again, a lot of this training is on the job. There's still mostly on the job training and construction. Yep. I don't think there's any doubt about that. But you can teach people, you can teach foremen. In fact, I'm leading a boot camp for our own company. About 85 foremen are coming into Dallas, Texas for a weekend in January. And the whole theme of that weekend is on training. And half the guys aren't going to like it. And the other half are not necessarily going to love it, but they're going to recognize that they need to do this or they're going to lose their workers. So this is really an interesting time, but I do try to teach them. So we have the 90-day plan. Another thing that I've developed is a little kind of a report card. It's 10 very simple questions that they can rank 1 to 5 on how well the employee did. The foreman would do it at the end of the week on a new employee. And then there's 2 questions basically talking about that they can put in writing. What do you need to work on this week? Based on what we saw you do this week, here's what you can work on next week. Then they will give that to that employee, take a picture of it, and then give that a copy of that to the new worker. And again, one of the reasons behind that is this: most employees want to know how they're doing. What does the boss think of how they're doing? Well, okay, let's meet that need. Now, I tell you this, Elizabeth, because any employee can do this. Any contractor can do what I just said. But the point is, most of them won't take the time to do that. And if they did, they're still going to lose. They're still going to have some turnover. But I think you're going to reach people who really are destined and have the potential not only to work in the industry, but to work for your company. And to me, that changes the culture. Because of now what you're doing is you're sending a very clear message that, hey, we're going to not only give you a chance to make it, we're going to actually help you. And we've got a plan for you. And I've always told contractors, think about this. Remember your first day on a new job. And a lot of times I challenge these foremen, go back to the very first time you stepped onto a construction site as a brand new employee. You didn't know anything. And how did you learn? Who trained you? And so the idea here is that we've got to remind these leaders that when they bring a new employee on, that new employee has got all kinds of sensitivity going out. They are overly sensitive to everything around them. The way a guy looks at them, the way they talk to them, those kind of things. Very, very limited on the technical side. It's all emotional and psychological. And so anything we can do to improve the first few days. And I've actually laid out for a foreman what foreman can do on day one, what they can do in the first week, what can they do in the first month, what they can do in the first quarter of the year, 90 days, and then what they can do in the first year. And the idea there is that because when people quit, most of the time they tell interviewers that they quit because of their boss, not the company many times, it's the boss. Yeah. And so who are the bosses of our young construction workers coming in? Well, it's foremen, it's supervisors, it's superintendents, whatever the nomenclature is at the company. So I do think that I don't know if winning this war is the right way to define this, but I don't think we're going to be successful if we just depend on hiring people who are already trained. Now we're always going to see a little pirating, what I call pirating or poaching from other companies, but I've never been in favor of companies going after employees at another contract. Those things always come back to haunt you.
Yeah, it's a small industry. People talk.
It's very small. Yeah, it's very small. And people right now, it is definitely an employee's market.
Yeah.
So, they will turn and leave for 50 cents more an hour. They're gone. And so you better have more than just the dollars. But you said something earlier, which I think is very appropriate. The money made in construction is much more than most people know. A lot of your laborers that come in, even at $14, $15 an hour, most employers will tell you they try to get raises as quickly as possible because they know if they don't pay more, they're not going to keep them long term. We've got foremen, and I've seen foremen who are making 6 figures on a regular basis. And some of these folks some of them didn't graduate from high school. So right. You've got an incredible opportunity money-wise. So when people tell me, well, you can't make much money in construction, I just laugh. Yeah. Because I'm telling you, I know a lot of college degree people with social degrees, social service degrees, and they're not making $35,000 a year.
And they've got student loan debt probably that they're working to pay off too.
And they got student loan debt on top of that. I know, exactly. So I think we're onto something if we do that. One more thing. I know I'm rambling a little bit, but one of the things that's interesting, I got on the board in Texas, what's an organization called Skills USA.
Mm-hmm.
And most people in construction have heard of that. Mike Rowe, the Dirty Jobs guy, which is a funny guy to watch, and a lot of people know who he is. He's kind of supported the national level at that level. But it's a great competitive organization that brings young people, and not sometimes always too young, who can come and they actually can compete in different skills. There's over 100 skill areas, and it's not all construction. It could be cosmetology, could be learning to be an EMS, all these kind of different beautiful skills. And I think that's wonderful because that's why I'm involved. When I see organizations like that, and that's why when I got asked to serve on the Texas board, I was really excited because I'm working with the post-secondary. I'm working with the technical schools and the colleges that have because these young people are ready to go to work. I mean, they're not like high school, or they may want to go to college for 2 years and get a junior college degree or a technical degree. But the point of the matter is, if we don't support those kind of efforts, we really are going to be in a hard place.
I totally agree with you. One of the interesting things that I think bears some additional thought is a lot of the young people coming in or thinking about coming into the industry may not have the traditional skill set that a construction company would look for, but they might be pretty tech savvy. They might have some skill sets that, the older generation in construction didn't have access to or the availability to learn when they were coming in. And I wonder what that intersection is of transferring the kind of mechanical knowledge and then also supporting the technical side of training, both for new employees coming in. They may have, consistently used a smartphone since they were a kid. Yep. They may be familiar with all of, the ins and outs of computers, but they might not know how to operate a piece of equipment or machinery. They might not know where to be on a construction site or how to be helpful when something's going on. And I'm curious, if you have seen or if you think you'll start to see more tech training, we have so many new tools that are coming into the industry that are tech related as well. What does the training look like there? What do you think about when you think of maybe new skill sets that people should be starting to pay attention to in employees that are coming in and applying for jobs?
That's a great, that is, boy, you've really teed me up nicely with that one. I could preach for days on that. I won't to save you a lot of agony. One of the things that you said earlier, I think we need to address, what this is called is, in training, you hear the term competency. And I introduced this word to contractors and owners and leaders at major conferences, and I've written about it a lot. I've been very fortunate. I've had over 500 articles published and a bunch of books. And so it just makes me well-versed on a lot of stuff. Doesn't mean I'm an expert on everything, but I do know that competency is a word that involves both sort of technical as well as non-technical skill development. And you're absolutely right. If I were to give the first recommendation to a contractor on what to do with a brand new worker to begin with, if anything else, teach them technical training as soon as possible. That can start in the first week. In fact, I've encouraged, I'm trying to get the organization I'm working with, I'm trying to get us to back off and say, wait a minute, the first 2 days, don't put the new worker out in the field. Let's keep them in the yard and teach them the tools. Let's teach them what the equipment looks like, the purposes of these things. Then when you send them out to the job with a foreman who may not want him anyway because he's brand new, now at least he knows the difference between a hammer and a screwdriver.
Yep.
I mean, we've got young people that don't know how to use a tape measure. I mean, they don't know how to add 12 inches to 15 inches or how to, what square foot is. I mean, these are the basics of construction. So if we could do that, even in the first couple of days, even if they don't get it completely, they're at least familiar with it.
Yep.
And so I think it's very important that we start there. At that point, though, Elizabeth, you're right on. You have to start training technically. Now, how you train and how much you train technically in a day's time, that's where my 90-day plan comes in. Because you may not, let's say a construction concrete worker he needs to learn how just to form up concrete. You're not going to teach a brand new employee in concrete how to finish concrete in the first week, in most cases. So I'm probably going to teach him what the tools are. I'm going to try to teach him how to form up concrete and then let him do some of that. Well, that's going to require him to use a hammer. That's going to require him to position the pieces of wood in the right way. It's going to require him to learn how to drive a nail. So if you just taught that skill for the first couple of weeks, now he could be doing other things throughout the day, picking up trash here or there, that kind of thing. But the point is that we have to start somewhere. And a lot of times, this is where the patience of the contractor, when I say contractor, I really mean the leaders out there teaching the new employee, probably the foreman or the leadman.
Yep.
The really good ones have always realized that most young people, most young new people to the workforce aren't going to get things in the first week. They're still, their mind's dizzy. But if you stay with the very basics, get them, because here's the deal. When an employee feels comfortable and confident that they are now doing something that's contributing to the crew's productivity, their attitudes go up. Statistically, we know that's true. So that's why I've always said, don't think that a 3-day-old new employee is going to learn how to finish concrete, or it could be anything, running electrical lines.
Yep.
It could be, putting carpet down, whatever your trade is. But the point is that most contractors, if they would just stop for a moment and break out what they do, break that into some smaller pieces, and then assign a timeline to that, they might be surprised how much, number one, further along the new employee would get. Number two, they'd have a lot better measurement of how to review that new employee. Are they the type of person who can work for us? And number three, you're giving that new employee a lot more reasons to be excited about coming back to work the next day.
Absolutely. And I think, it's an interesting it's an interesting contrast when you think about a lot of the construction companies that are out there today are family owned and family run. And there's this inherent kind of like feel of, okay, we're an extended family, like the whole family for the business owners are involved. They're here. And you have that mentality and concept, and it could lead people to think like, okay, day one, this is like a family, like I'm going to be in the mix. But unless you actually put that throughout your full culture and you have everybody on the team kind of thinking that way, it's not going to happen. And some of the ways that you can make it happen are exactly what you're talking about. Those training programs, the first 90 days of an employee's time period are probably the most sensitive for them and for the company. There's the most risk in that period of time. But if you can overcome, the initial challenges, if you can get somebody bought into what you're doing, and you are able to show them early that the company will take care of them in whatever way that means, right? Whether it's training or it's, flexibility if there's things going on in their personal life. Once you develop those relationships, it's really easy, I think, for people to like have your back and look out for you. But those first few days are critical, and there's going to be some people that don't make it. And even doing the 90-day program you've laid out, just not going to be the right fit, and that's okay. But if you give them the opportunity, they might really actually open up. They might start to shine, and not only will the foreman benefit because now they've got one more productive member of the team, but then that's somebody who just went through all of this. And if you bring somebody else in, maybe they're more willing to kind of help move that person along too, because they were just in their shoes. If your whole crew is people that have been doing it for 10 or 15 years, it's hard to remember what that experience was like. I think it's a great way to bring people on. And it's interesting to think about if you get a few new employees at the same time, how can you build ways for them to support each other? Or if you're bringing people in every few months, how can that last crew, even though they're still new, they still don't know all of the details, but how can they support people coming onto the job site, even if they don't fully have the technical skill set yet? From a cultural perspective, they may be able to help them feel included and welcomed more easily than some other members of the team.
Yeah, and I think it's important when you bring a new employee on. I didn't use this, but I mean, it's part of the way that I teach hiring and recruiting, not recruiting, hiring and retention. Put them with a buddy. I don't care what you call it, a buddy system or a mentoring system. And it doesn't have to be a leader. It could be a coworker.
Exactly.
And again, you said something also that's very, very valuable. Even if that employee doesn't make it, the other employees recognize that the company is making a good effort at trying to help people. I've also found that when you get that employee that's new and let's say they become to pick up how to form up for concrete, or again, it doesn't matter what the trade is, and they've actually gotten fairly good at it. And then you hire another employee behind them a few weeks later, a few months later. Maybe let the new employee do the training on that even newer employee. There's a couple things there. One is, a lot of times, and I found this to be true too, you don't learn nearly as much until you have to train something, teach something. And teachers, whether it's in academics or whether it's trainers in the construction field or any industry, they'll always tell you the people who are actually doing the training, they almost seem to learn the most because they have to learn how to prepare and how to instill. There's also another little tool that's not a paper tool, but I introduced it to the world of concrete probably 25 years ago in my field planning classes, and it was called the crew huddle. And I had played football in college, and so the football huddle is something most people can visualize pretty quickly.
Yep.
And so I developed an AM crew huddle and a PM crew huddle. We actually have a little card that has an agenda for the AM huddle on one side, a PM agenda on the other side. And the AM huddle is a chance. You said something earlier. You want people to feel like we have a family here and that type of thing. Well, it's amazing to me. We say we want teamwork or we want a family atmosphere, but then we never bring people together. Yep. And so one of the things that helps make a good team is to bring people together. You win together, you sometimes lose together. And so the huddles were just a chance for you to get to the job site before everybody breaks and goes to work. We have a 1 to 2 minute meeting, maybe 30 seconds some days, because we've been doing the same thing for 30 days on the job site. But we always give an update on we always ask everybody, how you doing? We remind people of any safety issues. Yep. We remind them of what happened the day before. It's a good chance to, hey, folks, Elizabeth is with us. It's her second day. She's still learning. Make sure you look out for her, give her some advice, that kind of stuff. Anything like that in that first morning, it gives a chance for everybody to kind of get with each other and feel like they're going to be a team. Because most of the time, you're spread out on a job site. People are doing different tasks. And then I always believe you need to bring them together at the end of the day before you let them go home. And that's your chance for really just doing a quick debrief. And I always said that the morning huddle sets up the day, but the money is made on the PM huddle because you can have a daily debrief. What did we do? What could we have done better? What do we need tomorrow? Who's going to be here tomorrow?
Exactly.
That kind of thing. So anyway, those are just some other insights that added to what you just said. I think it's very valuable that you're right. Building the family culture, which most contractors want. They want that type of thing. They may not articulate it that way, but they do want that. But then they don't do anything to support that. And so, yeah, you can have a lunch out. You know, we'll go out and grill once in a while on a job site. We'll have something ready for them. This last summer, on some hot days, I got my ice chest and put watermelon and went out to job sites and cut pieces of watermelon. The guys went crazy.
I bet.
Yeah, and so those are the kind of things that I think you can add throughout the course of a year that can really impact the psychology of this whole thing.
Absolutely. I think that's a great point for us to kind of wrap up there. We have a couple of questions that we're asking all of our guests this season, so I'd love to quickly run through those with you, and then we'll let you get back to your busy schedule.
Okay.
Right now, I know we've kind of touched on it in this episode, most likely, but what do you think the biggest challenge facing the industry is right now?
Well, right now, I think it's COVID.
Yeah.
I just sat through a workshop last Friday on the legalities of the mandates that have been placed on us and through OSHA. And those are being challenged. There will be challenged in the courts. OSHA has backed off a little bit until this gets done. I know in the state of Texas, we're underneath the same court district as Louisiana and Mississippi. And so we've got to stay until January. So on a very realistic standpoint, I think COVID is going to be an interesting deal because this is an industry, again, of pretty hardcore frontier-like mentality people in construction. We're stronger than everybody. And so there's going to be some there's going to be a lot of resistance to that. So if we are mandated, so I do think that's a serious issue that is sort of out of our hands, but let's set that aside. Related to what we're talking about, I do think it's the whole issue of getting people acclimated and trained as early as possible. So if you're a contractor listening or watching this right now and you don't have any training programs and you have a little bit of a slow season or even a winter season where you may not be working very much, you better deep dive on what training materials can you develop. And don't try to think you have to present a university format. Look at what your crews do. Bring in some of your better people. Even if they're not good writers, have someone take their dictation and just write down the steps involved with whether it's forming up concrete, it's laying asphalt, it's stringing electrical lines if you're an electrician, putting sheetrock in, a roof in, whatever the case is. Break those into minimum or mini steps, and then develop how are we going to train that when we get new workers in there. That could turn a company around in a season if they would take the time to do that. So that would be the first thing, is training.
Awesome. And you've been in the industry for a while now. If you put on
watch it.
Future vision, well, certainly longer than me. But if you put in your future vision goggles, where do you see the industry being in 5 years?
Well, there's no doubt technology is moving in. We now have brick lane machines almost, in the masonry industry. I don't think it's ever going to become strictly a technical only with no people. I think there's still most aspects of construction needs human bodies out there, perfecting, that kind of thing, the program. So I think going down the road, I do think more and more technology is going to have to be assumed. I think that's one of the benefits that I would encourage contractors not to rule out. Not every younger person that comes to work is an expert on the computer. I get that. But they seem to have more affinity for the electronical approach. So anything, even little things like we're using drones more now than ever before in construction. A lot of it's used for PR reasons, but I encourage people to use drones even to do a daily overview of what happened on a job site. It's a great way and very visual way to give your employees an update. So I do think you said something like, you shared something earlier. I do think technology is changing big time, and we need to stay with that. So that's probably the biggest thing that I see. And then just holding on to the people when they're here. Now we're back to doing the things you and I talked about, over the last 20 minutes.
Yep. In terms of somebody that might be thinking about getting into construction, if you could just impart one piece of wisdom on them, what would that be?
I think the bigger thing is you may not know everything that there is about a particular trade or craft or way you do things. To me, it's never been the smartest people that always won in the end. It's the people who hung in there the longest. This is a very, very trying industry. I think it's the best industry in the world. In fact, I wrote a book on it, and you can get that at Amazon too. It's called Construction, the best industry in the world. And I really believe that. I listed 21 reasons, and the reason for that is if you like people, this is a great industry. If you like daily challenges, it's a great industry. If you like to experience winning, it's a great industry. If you want to be proud of things that you can leave a mark on, that you had a part in, it's a great industry. If you don't like people, then don't come into construction because you're going to be very frustrated. But I think to leave the mark going forward, I think it is a people industry. It is one, though, you have to have a lot of patience. You have to have a lot of grace. And I'll say this because, and this is not meant, I tell this in a funny manner, but we have really taken on, we often include employees that have some very, very negative, difficult backgrounds in their life. And so I always call this the second chance industry. Mm-hmm. This is an industry that takes men and women who maybe failed in their life earlier. They could have actually spent time and they might have been incarcerated. They may have been going through some difficult times in their personal lives. I've had drug addicts and ex-cons working for me over the years. And not all those guys worked out. Most of them did, actually, because when they've gone through those kind of life experiences, they don't want to go back there. And I've actually had those kind of young people tell me, I do not want to go back. I want to get my life together. And a lot of times those make some great employees, but not all do. But I do think that this is an industry that's very forgiving. We accept a lot. We tolerate a lot because good people are so hard to find. But good people can have bad days. Some of them can have bad weeks. Some of them have personal problems they just can't separate. So it's amazing how much give that we give people in this industry because a lot of times we just can't find other people, but we also care for people. I've never met an industry that is more caring for workers in the construction industry overall.
I agree. And I hear stories continually from people that it surprises you. Somebody's kid is sick and the company really steps up to, make ends meet or to provide a special experience for somebody or, hey, you've been working on this on the side for 3 years to get a degree and we're going to celebrate that. There's lots of ways that people are incorporating that into their company culture. And it's really a great thing to be able to see.
It is.
Only two other quick questions. One,
Sure.
where do you go for industry insights? So if you're looking for additional information, or you're trying to think about, hey, I've thought about incorporating X into my business, and I want to kind of see if there's anything written about that, where do you go?
Well, there are a lot of resources out there. Let me just start with what I know the most, because where I've written. I continue to write articles that are published by a company called AC Business Media, and you can actually and I don't get any dollars off of those things. Those are just good things for the industry, but not just my articles, but AC Business Media, Caterpillar, a lot of the resources out there. Elizabeth, y'all are putting out some great podcasts. I do think that a lot of contractors, one of the things a lot of them don't like to do is read very much. They really don't. They'll read specs, they'll read a profit and loss sheet, but they won't read literature. And I do think that there are pieces of literature out there, some that I've written, but there's a lot of other writers than just me, of course, in the industry. But I think if you'll visit your associations, if you're in the contract association, roofing industry, wiring industry, any industry what specialty you are, go to your association, because a lot of those associations will have a plethora of information. For instance, the ABC chapters all across the United States. I speak at a couple. I still speak at some today. The people who put on the World of Concrete, or the International Roofing Show, or all these different home modeling associations.
Yep.
They all have a great amount of resources. So I got to be real honest with you. I don't think you have to look very hard and very long. Yep. If you will go search out some of your own industries association, even the state level will have access. Now, you may have to join the association to get that kind of stuff for free. Yeah. But, a quick plug for any of those associations, because I've only spoken at a few of the thousands we have in the country. But the bottom line is those associations are for the contractors. Yep. And so if it costs you a couple $100 to even $1,000 or $2,000 a year, that's probably one of the best investments you can make for education for your workers. And in fact, many of these associations provide regular training, even on the technical things. Yep. The other thing I would do is contact some of your local high school districts that have career and technical education programs, CTE. Most of them are very open to having contractors come in and speak, and there's a reciprocal benefit there. You get a chance to get access to some of the next generation of workers. You may find some of your future workers sitting in a class, working on things in a construction mindset.
That's a great point. And then finally, if you could see someone else interviewed on this podcast, who would that be?
I think, there are a couple of the guys, if you listen to, you mentioned my podcast that I do with, at Caterpillar, a couple of the guys on that call are technical guys, but they're also very practical guys. And
Chris Seeger, we did an episode with him, and he's an example. Awesome. Wonderful, wonderful industry expert, wonderful wealth of knowledge. Absolutely.
Yeah. Chris is very special. And I brought him into that podcast on Caterpillar. When I got to know Chris and saw the depth of knowledge that he has, especially on just the entire equipment issues and all those kind of things. Of course, he's doing some other things now, which go beyond that. But I just think, the Lonnie and the guys that I work with on the Caterpillar podcast are just real gems. And they'd be good people for you to interview as well individually. I could certainly pass that on to you. But Chris is an industry expert. Other than that, I could list probably Guy Gurenberg is a guy that some folks in the industry might know. Guy's a very, very knowledgeable guy, no pun intended, in the industry, as well as others. But I'll just stop there. I might get myself in trouble if I don't name certain people.
It's like the award show speech that you're unprepared for.
Yeah, and then you forget your mom, forget to thank mom, that kind of thing.
Exactly.
Right.
Well, I appreciate you coming on with us today, Brad. It's been wonderful talking with you, and you sharing your wisdom is wonderful, and hopefully it's meant something to somebody out there listening today. So have a wonderful rest of the day. We appreciate chatting with you.
Thank you, Elizabeth. Have a good day.
I'm glad this is the first episode for the new year. I think it's really important to keep the conversation we had with Brad today at the top of our minds as we kick off 2022. Everyone's been up against a hiring challenge, but not everyone's talking about what you need to do to make sure that new employees you do hire stick around. If we're able to place an emphasis this year on making sure an employee's first 90 days go smoothly, if we can help them understand the basics of construction, their job, and make them feel like they can contribute to the team, maybe they'll see that they have a future in this industry. And that helps your business today and years from now. You know, Brad's right when he says that employees will jump ship for 50 cents, but only if they don't see a future with your company. Training might be the way to show these employees that you care about their success. You can set expectations so they'll know if they're doing a good job, and you can build a sense that they're part of the team from day one. And those are the things that will make an employee stick around. The changes Brad proposes will definitely require commitment, especially on the part of foremen. But if making these small changes is what it takes to turn the tide when it comes to hiring and retaining talent in 2022, isn't it worth it? Thanks for joining us today. And if you enjoyed the episode, please subscribe so you're notified of new episodes. And don't forget to leave us a review. Until next week, this is your host, Elizabeth, signing off.